Now, you've probably heard people talking recently about rare earth elements, but you might be wondering to yourself, well, what are they? How much of a big deal are they? And should we be worried about them?
Most people walk past a polluted creek without thinking twice. A streak of orange water, a sour metallic smell, a place you avoid, not investigate. But in parts of the United States, scientists found something inside that dirty water that changed everything. Because beneath the rust-colored foam and jagged rocks, hidden in the very streams people once called dead, lies a resource powerful enough to reshape global politics.
The coal mine drainage is a challenge because so many of the operations that created the problem have gone bankrupt and aren't there anymore to deal with it. And they've generated a pollutant source that could last for thousands of years.
Revolutionize American manufacturing and challenge the dominance of a rising superpower. This is the story of how toxic sludge inside abandoned coal mines became one of America's most valuable discoveries, and why China isn't happy about it. The creek that bled orange. If you had walked along Decker's Creek in northern West Virginia 20 years ago, nothing about it looked alive. The water ran a violent orange. The rocks were stained red and brown. The smell, sharp, metallic, unmistakable, hung in the air like a warning. Locals didn't dare fish there. Children were warned not to swim. Even insects avoided it.
Wants to swim in a creek that's bright orange, and who wants to fish in a creek where you're not going to catch fish.
The creek wasn't sick. It was dying, and the culprit was hidden deep in the hills. Abandoned coal mines, filled with fractured stone and a glittering mineral called pyrite, fool's gold. When rainwater seeped in, pyrite reacted slowly, relentlessly, producing acid that carved metals out of the rock. The result was acid mine drainage. Water so corrosive it could eat through pipes, poison wells, and turn a stream into a lifeless channel of waste. For decades, this was treated only as a curse, something to contain, something to forget. But then, scientists noticed something strange. The very metals being ripped from the rock weren't just iron and aluminum. They were something else. Something far more valuable.
And then ideally, if there is assistance that we can provide with helping in a Growing Greener grant for remediating some of these sources, that's what we want to do in the future.
Rare earth elements. The same metals used in fighter jets, smartphones, electric cars, wind turbines, and modern weapons. And the mud forming in these toxic creeks held levels of them comparable to actual mines overseas. It was the discovery nobody saw coming. And it was only the beginning. Because if the water held rare earth metals, the question became, could the United States actually harvest them? The chemistry nature performed by accident. Across Appalachia, abandoned mines became accidental laboratories.
The pyrite, or the iron sulfide minerals that are associated with the coal, get oxidized to form sulfuric acid, and that sulfuric acid dissolves rocks around it and gives you the iron, aluminum, manganese.
Acidic water dissolved metals into liquid form. Something traditional mining requires massive crushing plants and chemical baths to achieve. Then, when water reached treatment ponds and workers added lime to raise the pH, the dissolved metals, rare earths included, fell out of solution like snowflakes drifting to a riverbed. West Virginia University researchers measured the sludge. What they found stunned them. In northern parts of the state, every ton of dried sludge contained nearly 2 pounds of rare earth metals, numbers that rivaled or surpassed overseas ore. And unlike traditional mining, there was no blasting, no drilling, no mountains torn apart. Nature had already done the hard part. The old mines had dissolved the metals. The treatment plants had collected them. All scientists had to do was refine them. It sounded almost too good to be true. But if the numbers were accurate, polluted creeks, once scars of an old energy era, were suddenly becoming America's most unlikely strategic asset, and the world's largest supplier of rare earth elements was paying close attention. An American resource is reborn at the Richard Mine site near Morgantown, West Virginia. One of the worst pollution sources became the perfect testing ground. The stream below the mine was once a ribbon of orange death. Now, a state-of-the-art treatment facility stood beside it, powered by a new idea. Instead of treating mine drainage as waste, what if it was treated as ore? Engineers divided the cleanup system into two chemical steps. First, they raised the pH to around 4.5. Iron and aluminum dropped out, but most rare earths remained dissolved. Then, in a second stage, they pushed the pH to about 8.5. That's when the rare earth metals finally fell out of solution, settling into a dense, metal-rich sludge. The plant pumped that sludge into long white tubes, geotextile bags, where water slowly drained away, leaving behind something astonishing: a compact, easily shipped concentrate of rare earth metals. In a world increasingly defined by supply chains and geopolitics, this wasn't just a scientific breakthrough. It was strategic. This was America's first new, easily accessible, rare earth resource in decades. But extracting the metals was only half the challenge. To really matter, this sludge had to be turned into something manufacturers could use, and that required a new kind of refinery. From sludge to strategic weapon. Inside the National Research Center for Coal and Energy at West Virginia University, engineers built a pilot plant unlike anything in America. Rows of tanks, pumps humming day and night, stainless steel platforms coated with thin films of chemical mist. Their mission: turn river sludge into high-purity rare earth oxides. Step 1. Dissolve the dried sludge in acid. Step 2. Separate the metals through solvent extraction, a process not unlike teasing oil and water apart. Step 3. Isolate each rare earth element until only a pure oxide powder remained. And it worked. The plant produced rare earth concentrates with purities around 98%. Enough to prove the method wasn't just academic, it was industrial. For the first time in modern history, the United States had a way to extract rare earths from its own waste streams. No open pits, no radioactive byproducts, no dependence on foreign states, just rivers healing and metals emerging. And this was happening at the exact moment the world needed rare earths more than ever. Because far away, another force was tightening its grip. Why China is watching America's creeks for years. The United States assumed rare earths would always be available. It closed mines, shut down processing plants, outsourced the entire supply chain. China didn't. China built the mines, built the refineries, mastered the chemistry, and then the magnets. Today, China controls 70% of the world's rare earth ore, nearly 90% of its processing, and over 90% of the final magnets that power electric vehicles. Magnets inside missile guidance systems, magnets in fighter jets, submarines, and wind turbines. And beginning in 2025, China began leveraging that dominance. First, through export controls on 7 strategic rare earth categories. Then, through new rules restricting the export of rare earth mining and magnet-making technology. The message was clear: we control the metals the world needs. Factories across Europe and Japan scrambled. Automakers warned of shutdowns. Magnet shipments plunged by 75%. But in the United States, something had changed. For the first time, the country wasn't completely powerless, because in forgotten hollows of West Virginia, in poisoned creeks in Pennsylvania, in the massive toxic pit in Butte, Montana, a new American rare earth supply was quietly rising. Not enough to replace China, not yet, but enough to matter, enough to build resilience, enough to start an industry, enough to say, we're not entirely dependent anymore. And that alone was a shift China could not ignore. The global stakes of a polluted stream. Behind every stream cleanup, every geotextile bag full of sludge, every batch of bright oxide powder, lies a larger truth. Rare earths are not just metals. They are leverage. They determine who builds the next generation of military technology, who leads the clean energy revolution, who controls the supply chains of the future. And now, America is learning that its greatest resource may not be buried deep underground, but flowing through the very rivers it once abandoned. From West Virginia's Richard Mine to Montana's Berkeley Pit to dozens of polluted waterways waiting for discovery. The United States is realizing that what was once waste may become its competitive edge. And as engineers scale these systems, as pilot plants grow into industrial facilities, as more rivers transform from orange to clear, the balance of power begins to shift. Not overnight, not instantly, but steadily, quietly, like metals dissolving in water and settling into mud. The river that could change everything. This is the story of a resource the world overlooked. A resource that hid in plain sight, in places where no one wanted to look. A resource born not from drilling or blasting, but from the long scars of the past. In America's polluted streams, scientists found more than metals. They found a second chance, a way to clean the land, restore rivers, revive communities, and challenge a global monopoly, all at the same time. The question now isn't whether rare earths can be extracted from America's rivers. It's how quickly this discovery can scale, how far it can grow, and how it will reshape the balance of power in the decades to come. Because somewhere between the orange-stained stones and the quiet flow of a recovering creek lies a future the world never expected. A future that begins with water.